Welcome to Insights, everyone. I'm Nnamdi Odipo, and Elizabeth Omori is with me as usual.
Thanks for joining us on Insight this week.
Thousands of cases of cholera has been reported in Nigeria between January and now, and we know that the major last outbreak in 2018 recorded almost over 43,000 cases, with a number of deaths actually. As a matter of fact, to be precise, we recorded 836 deaths, which was a case fatality rate of 1.90%. With that in mind, I mean, we do now know, and I've always known, in fact, that cholera is a clear and present danger in Nigeria and would require an integrated response structure. We will be looking at the prospects for an effective response plan in our discussion segment. Elizabeth will be handling the media review segment of the program. Elizabeth?
Well, still on our plate this week is human trafficking. What is the implication on our nation, society, and family? We'll find out.
Very well, then let's begin the discussion. We'll now begin with environmental health issues, and I'm joined by the Provost, College of Health Sciences and Technology, that Kogi State is also the immediate past National Deputy President, Environmental Health Officers Association of Nigeria, Dr. Nuhu Solomon. Welcome to Insight.
Thank you very much. You're welcome.
I'd like to play back a pictorial that speaks to the causes and effects of cholera in an impacted community, and then we'll take up the conversation from there. Can we have that? This is quite sad. We've only played a small portion of the entire pictorial, but I'm sure that that this excerpt establishes the link between cholera and water, sanitation and hygiene. Would you like to draw the correlation between two or more of these risk factors for proper understanding, of course?
Yeah. When we talk about cholera, it is a communicable disease in the first place. And it is characterized by diarrhea and vomiting taking place at the same time. And this is initiated by a contraction of the bacteria called Vibrio cholerae. And many a times, this bacteria is ingested orally, that is through drinking of contaminated water or a contaminated food. And again, sometimes it is also transmitted through contaminated food, because flies that perches on human feces carry this bacteria from the feces to the food or water that an individual drinks. And when it gets into the gastrointestinal tracts, they multiply into thousands and millions, and before you know it, the disease, signs and symptoms begin to manifest.
Well, I get the explanation.
Yeah.
It would seem that some of the most affected states currently in Nigeria, I mentioned there's Plateau, Bauchi, Gombe, Kano, Zamfara, Bayelsa, and Kaduna. Surprisingly, Abuja is also in the thick of the current outbreak.
Yeah.
For me, this is more fascinating, because in the past, well, still now, cholera is often perceived as a disease of poverty because several social risk factors play significant roles in its transmission. Localize the outbreak in Abuja, for instance, and give me your prognosis on the challenge.
Actually, we cannot entirely say it is a disease of poverty, but we can say it's a sanitation-related disease. It's an excreta-related infection, and it is a disease that is majorly caused by poor hygiene and sanitation. That is where human excreta is not properly disposed, is not properly buried. People carry out what we call open air defecation. And since this bacteria, Vibrio cholerae, is found inside the feces of an infected person, flies that are must have proliferated in the environment will perch on this excreta and then carry it long distances to places where food are not covered as well. That is why we say the right word is it is a disease associated with poor sanitation. So it is a sanitation-related infection. It is an excreta-related disease.
But in a state like Abuja, where It's more of sanitation than the non-availability of say pipe-borne water, for instance. We know in rural communities, you know, far-flung rural communities, those in the hinterland, perhaps the lack of some apparent amenities like pipe-borne water, and the fact that they have to go to a communal stream to fetch water that might easily get polluted is a high risk factor.
Yeah.
But then, in Abuja, one would expect Abuja has quite a sustainable management, sanitation management system in place, and yet we're seeing this play out here.
Yeah. The reason is because, that is why I say it is also sanitation-related disease. You know, the environment is not sanitary. The environment is not clean. And
Clean enough, you mean?
Yes, yes.
Because one will consider Abuja maybe not the cleanest city or state in the country, but reasonably so, relatively clean.
When you get to some of the markets, you see heaps of refuse. You know, that, and this refuse, when rain falls, they proliferate, they putrefy, the refuse begin to decay, and these attract flies. And these flies can travel long distances,
True.
You know, from places where they practice open air defecation. Even this place that we may claim that it is a clean city, you know, there are places where people still carry out open air defecation. And the flies, as they perch on these feces, you know, morphologically, if you look at the structure of flies, the legs are having sticky parts, they're having hairy legs. So all these bacteria, the Vibrio cholerae, get attached to the hairy legs and sticky parts. And as it travels long distances, it perch on food, and the food become contaminated. And now, if one single person get infected, this makes the spreading of the disease very easy, because the disease is characterized by diarrhea and vomiting. So the vomitus and the excreta coming out of this individual contain the bacteria already. Flies will also perch on this excreta and then fly like that. So before you know it, the transmission become easy, and it will just be going like wildfire.
Much as this is a public health issue, it's also an environmental health issue. Incidentally, it is proven that cholera is a preventable and treatable epidemic-prone disease. But there is something quite troubling about the trend of occurrence and the periods within which it has happened, that we have recorded outbreaks, massive, huge outbreaks in Nigeria, whether it's in 1991, whether it's 2010, 2014. The last one before now was 2018. And, you know, what is noticeable about the trend and the cases is that they tend to increase with the onset of the rainy season. Why is that so?
Yes, I talked about heaps of refuse. The heaps of refuse that are indiscriminate, you see lots of flies perching on them. And the decomposition of this refuse become easy during the rainy season. And again, flash flood, carry feces in open air environment. You know, in places where they carry out open air defecation, it takes it to bodies of water. And if these bodies of water, where we are getting this water for drinking from, is not properly, is not properly treated, already the water is contaminated, and people consuming the water are easy. It becomes very easy to actually contract the infection.
We already have some projections on flooding for this year. What does that translate to? Does that mean while we prepare to mitigate possible damages and leakages from the flooding, we should also prepare for environmental health issues?
Yes, definitely. You know, one of our past registrar, the Registrar of Environmental Health Officers, Registration Council of Nigeria, Dr. Ebisike Augustine, he said something, and I quote, he said, the major index with which we measure the effectiveness of environmental services or sanitation in any state or nation is a drastic reduction in the occurrence of common communicable disease and, if possible, total elimination. Now, what does that tell us now? Actually, environmental health services is not very effective in our nation. There are so many factors that are responsible for this. And if we must get it right, we must come back to start carrying out the recommendation by the World Health Organization as far as sanitation and environmental services is concerned. Because flooding is also an environmental sanitation-related problem. You know, remember that there is what we call flash flood. When there is heavy rain, the water, the runoff water that spreads and flow everywhere is called flash flood. Yes. And many a time it is caused by damaged drains or blocked drainages. So if the drainages are blocked because of indiscriminate disposal, definitely more problems will be occurring. So it is left for the individuals, government, professionals to be more active at this time so that more problems that are sanitation related will not come up at this season.
Well, talking about response, we know that the Nigerian Center for Disease Control has already activated a multi-sectorial National Cholera Emergency Operations Center to intensify response in states. What kind of investments, because you've already referenced that, should we be seeing in environmental health at this point in time, and of course in the long term?
You see, if we want to deal with some of these problems of communicable disease outbreak and problem of flood, we shouldn't be defensive. Okay. All these responses we're talking about are defensive mechanisms put in place by government.
We should be proactive?
Thank you. We should be proactive. What are the causes of this flood? Why are we having communicable disease outbreak? These are issues that we should be thinking about. And if we must not have communicable disease outbreak like cholera, gastroenteritis, typhoid fever, and a host of others, what we should do is to pay priority attention to preventive medicine, to pay serious attention to environmental sanitation and environmental health services, instead of government pumping lots of money into the curative health care. And when we are doing that, it is like you see a tree, you are only trimming, you want to deal with the tree, you are trimming the shoots, you are not dealing with the root. The tree will not die. So if we want to deal with the problem of sanitation, we should deal with the problems from the root. How can you deal with the problem from the root? Government should employ adequate number of environmental health officers so that they should be able to carry out public campaign, sensitization, health education, and advocacy, so that people should know why these diseases are spreading. People should know what are the behaviors and attitudes that people carry out that is actually leading to this outbreak of diseases. People should also know why there is flooding has become an incessant issue, why it has become a problem in our nation. All these are the major things that should be put into consideration if this problem must be eliminated.
I hear you. I hear you loud and clear. But time and again, we talk about poor personal and environmental hygiene. And I have come to realize that the challenge, generally, is a function of many factors. Negative behavioral factors, sometimes cultural. And sometimes it ends up becoming systemic. And this lies at the center of global efforts to address the root causes of poor health through improved preventive health strategies, of course. Doc, you have stressed here how the environment can be a platform for good health, and improved and good health, and also for poor health, depending on how seriously we plan and implement activities to engender good environmental health practices. What then and why is that not happening as a matter of emergency for the now and for the future?
Yes.
Considering that it's an amalgam of factors responsible, not just employing environmental health officers alone.
Yes. The reason why we are not getting it is because it's multifactorial. We have the aspects of government, we have the aspect of individuals, and we have the aspect of the professionals, the environmental health officers. On the aspect of individuals, many people are recalcitrant. Many people are stubborn. Many people are stiff-necked when it comes to implementing laws that has to do with sanitation. People now see the environmental health officers as enemies when actually they are helpful, when actually they are out to protect public health. And until they are properly sensitized, so that they should embrace all the things the professionals are telling them, then we will still not get it right, and that is a major issue. So, and I discovered that sensitization, health education, and health campaign is very low in our nation. Many people are ignorant, and ignorance is a major factor that leads to this disease causation. So if we must get it right, the behavioral attitude of people must change through extensive and intensive health education. Then again, on the aspect of government should be able to invest lots of resources into the environmental health sector. And again, there should be adequate funding. There should be adequate budgetary allocation of government to environmental health services. I think this reminds me that in 2008, there was this African Ministerial Conference that took place in Dubai. And now what led to the conference was that all the nations that make up this conference, having critically appraised the state of sanitation in their respective countries, they discovered that the sanitation was poor. And because of that, there was an outbreak of common communicable diseases in their respective nations. So they now came up and discovered a factor that is responsible for this, which is inadequate budgetary allocation. So they came up with what we call Itikwani Declaration. And what was the declaration all about? That is a minimum of 0.5% of total budgetary allocation of government should be dedicated to sanitation. And they should go back to their respective nations and implement that. But here in this nation, how much are we implementing this? And when we don't get it from the root like that, there is no way we can set the problem. If there is adequate budgetary allocation of government at the federal level, state level, and local government level, necessary facilities for sanitation will be procured. You will see government establishing waste recycling plants. You will see government buying payloaders. You will see government buying refuse disposal facilities. They will be able to employ adequate number of environmental health officers. They will be able to employ adequate number of laborers and cleaners who will be doing sanitation everywhere. They will be able to actually sink boreholes so that people will have access to potable water supply and all these. And they will mobilize environmental health officers to carry out extensive health education. When we do this, I'm telling you the truth, the problem that is environmental health related, problem of disease outbreak will be greatly controlled. And for the professionals, we should be able to come out of our comfort zone, not sitting down in the offices. We should be able to identify the fact that we have a responsibility to our people, which is the protection of public health. And then they should be able to go out, carry out house-to-house inspection, detecting nuisances and getting them abated, sensitizing the members of the public through different social media, communication media, so that people, the ignorance that is in the people should be dispelled, and then people will be able to have good and sound health.
Doc, you've said plenty actually, but just before we wrap up this conversation, I'll need you to confirm that Nigeria can indeed beat a disease like cholera. And if communities, of course, get their hearts together. I do know that the oral cholera vaccine is not part of our routine vaccination in Nigeria, I beg your pardon. And in fact, we also do know that it is not 100% effective against cholera and does not protect against other foodborne and waterborne diseases. But very quickly, and I need you to help me do something here, can you use a nugget style, because you've said plenty, use a nugget style to outline what you consider as the core elements of a national response plan?
Okay. You see, in the national response plan, I believe health education should be key.
1.
2, adequate funding of environmental health sector should be another.
2.
Then 3, there should be provision of basic sanitation facilities, provision of public toilets in strategic locations in the metropolis, in the community. Then again...
That's 3, so you go to 4.
Yeah, provision of other basic sanitation facilities like payloaders, compactor trucks, refuse van. All this is very important.
That's for management now. Remember,
yeah.
That's 4.
Yeah. Then 5, establishment of waste recycling plant. By the time government established waste recycling plant in different states of the federation, you remember what this waste recycling plant does? there will be people will be looking for refuse. People will be looking for debt everywhere, and by the time we begin to scan for refuse everywhere to get them to the waste recycling plant, everywhere will be cleaner, everywhere will be safer, and then we will have a healthier nation.
I want to thank you so much for coming on Inside, Dr. Nuhu Solomon Ayegun, Provost College of Health Sciences and Technology, Ida, Kogi State. And of course, immediate past Deputy National President, Environmental Health Officers Association of Nigeria. Thank you very much indeed.
God bless you, sir.
Thanks for staying with us. Insecurity is one of the challenges currently confronting Nigeria, and the federal government is clearly doing all it can to repress the activities of those who now constitute a threat to our continued unity and the safety of lives and property. In a previous episode, I spoke with Professor Adam Okene Ahmed, the Director, Linkages and Collaboration at the Nigerian Defense Academy, Kaduna. We talked at length about strategies for effectively winning an asymmetrical warfare. Let's recall that conversation. Well, Prof, I know you and I have talked about this issue sometime in the past, but let me quickly bring it up. Nigeria's major response to the insurgency since 2010 has been the deployment of its joint task force, that is the JTF, consisting of the Army, Air Force, the Navy, State Security Services, and of course there's also the police, under a unified command structure. Apparently, an unconventional war requires a blend of conventional attack and unconventional strategies as well. Give me an outline of how that can happen, while also attempting to repress the ideological base of the insurgency.
Thank you very much, and happy to be here. The issue of security, as you rightly know, is a very challenging one globally, but Nigeria has its own serious dimension to it, and it's been extremely very excruciating. I agree to a very large extent that the reaction of the government and Nigerian people to the insurgency and the terrorism that is happening, especially of the Northeast brand, the Boko Haram, ISWAP, and others, has been a military, military operation, try to nip it in the bud. Yeah, if that could solve the problem, we should have seen the end of the crisis. But we are still there. There have been a lot of successes. But then I also agree that it is time now to look at the other side and see other alternative measures that can be used to bring the insecurity, especially the armed banditry, the Boko Haram, that's terrorism, and others, to an end. I believe strongly, yeah, we should be able to explore. But let me be very quick to say that, yeah, it's true that we have been using the military operation. It has been fight, and so on. But under the ground, there has also been some non-kinetic exposition. There has been some other things, that's the so-called carrot measure that has been used. But it may not have been absolutely adequate. But now, because of the fact that the crisis continue to linger on, and because there are new dimensions that are coming into the crisis daily, that it is now time for us to look again scientifically, but even critically, at the other methods, other measures of bringing this quagmire to an end, or to subsidize it to a very, very high level.
Can you give us an idea of some of these strategies that you've just talked about, you've just referenced?
Yeah, thank you very much. There are so many strategies that can be. First of all is negotiation. What do I mean by negotiation? Negotiation, orientation, and using an ideological means to be able to solve the problem. One is, let's for the first time look for those that are involved.
Okay.
Either in the operation or those that we feel might be involved in the instigation of the crisis. Either the Boko Haram crisis, the terrorism, or the armed banditry and insurgency in the North Central and Northwest particularly, and even to a very good extent Southeast. And ask them question, what do we want?
Okay.
And deploy some official who are well trained to negotiate, to intercourse with them. For example, the National Orientation Agency, answer the Office of the National Security Advisor, using some religious scholar, for example, for the banditry, use some elders of the Fulani and getting in and trying to bring them in to be able to talk to the people that are involved.
Prof, I guess you're referencing political negotiations now to the crisis. I mean, this is something that has been done in the past, but I'll come to that. But you know, I know that our strategy revolves around the political, socio-economic, and diplomatic response. But if these political negotiations, which never succeeded in the past, because I recall that the rather unreasonable demands in 2011 and 2012 from the insurgents to the then administration of President Goodluck Ebele Jonathan. Can we now perhaps apply the tactic deployed in, say, a country like Colombia, where they had a philosophy of holding people accountable down to the lowest level? And I mean the average citizen now supporting the insurgents there.
I think you are correct to a very reasonable extent. But then, when we said political negotiation, it is not devoid of other substances: social negotiation, economic and material negotiation, and times varies. I agree that even before 2011, there had been effort where you have some negotiating team who have tried to reach to some people who are thought to have some influence on, for example, the Boko Haram. But it turned out that it was not a reality. It turned out that there were no sincerity. It turned out that some of the committees that were set up at that time were not deep root enough to be able to take on the issue at this point. And also, there was some pecuniary interest of either the committee or some other people who could get involved. You know, so I think when we want to now, for example, the banditry, the ISWAP and the other terrorism, the other criminal elements are now aware that the current regime is determined to stampede, is determined to bring an end to this issue. And the kind of the military intervention that has been made so far has indicated that the military intervention or the security intervention has the capability and the capacity to be able to check, given other variables in good condition, other variables. Then it means, therefore, they will be ready now, to my thinking, that there should be a discussion, there should be a negotiation. If you remember, just about 1 or 2 days ago, a large number of members of Boko Haram and ISWAP have surrendered to the military, just about 1 or 2 days ago, which means they know that the game is likely coming to be over soon. And it will be over soon. And if it's going to be over soon, it is better for them to listen to the voice of reason, voice of responsibility, and voice of peace, negotiation, and resolution, rather than being continuously recalcitrant and creating a lot of crisis and killing and terror and blood. You know, so this is my own thinking about this. Like, I also believe that when you say keeping people to accountability,
yes,
this is something that has been in minuses for a very long time. The state level, the local government level, and even people that are heading parastatals that are very sensitive, that are germane to the economic well-being, the political and material well-being of the people. Now, I agree that it is now time to hold them responsible, which means, and don't forget, namely that the devolution of power, or what we can say, the issue of making the various arms of government accountable, is now in the forefront in the current regime. For example, recently the local government are now going to be on their own. Yes. So it means individuals, civil society, the people in the citizens of local government can now walk to the local government chairman and other and said, look, we do not know what you are doing with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They can be accountable. And they wouldn't be able to complain reasonably and legitimately that the governor has been holding them, so they could not be able to perform. They know absolutely they have to be accountable. I want to believe that when these measures are properly put into place and they are practiced for 1, 2 years, some of these issues are going to be solved.
Okay, Prof, I will take you up on the issue of the very nature of this war. I mean, this ongoing, lingering warfare in the course of our discussion, because you've raised something quite germane, and it's fascinating. I would like to put you to task to it, but let me give you some breather now, and just let me just very bit and talk about what I consider, because I have looked at the recent attack on the Air Force jets, someplace in the northeast or so, some weeks ago, by elements described as bandits. And it does seem to me, it makes me suspect that there's now a convergence of some sort of operations by non-state actors in the northeast and some other parts of the country. Is this common when we have a lingering asymmetric warfare lasting as long as the one that has lasted here in Nigeria? And doesn't that compound our campaign to successfully end the insurgency here?
Yeah, you are very correct. When crises linger on, people find means of circumventing the rules, and people find means of staying on the crisis. And now when you say convergence of crises or those that are involved in criminality
between, yes,
or something,
yes,
we have to look at some of the causative factors of even the insurgency themselves, terrorism, armed banditry, and some other criminality that we have, especially in the northeast, in the northwest, and north central. Globalization is very key. Climate change is very key, and the fact that Nigeria is considered as one of the most endowed, and if not the most endowed resource-wise in the sub-region, and even in Africa. So, I mean, if you just take a look at West African subcontinent, which countries can measure Nigeria in terms of resources? So the very fact that you have human resources, but you also have material resources, mineral resources, is enough to invite people and to Nigeria. That is one. And two, do also not forget that the crisis that has been lingering on in the Sudan, Darfur, Mali, and North Africa, the so-called Arab Spring, all have their own consequences, and they have also pushed people to be moving down. And so these are all, and these are all factors that have pushed people down to Nigeria. And Nigeria is also very vast. You need to travel out of Nigeria to some of the neighboring countries, then you appreciate the fact that Nigeria is well endowed. And when the people are well endowed and people think that it is very easy for them to enter, the tendency is that there is what you will get, what we now call as this convergence. I agree. Now you now have, if you remember, there has been a lot of talk that if care is not taken, there has going to be dimension to the Boko Haram terrorism in the northeast. For example, I presented my inaugural lecture on terrorism, Boko Haram, and using a security study as a means of studying the crisis. Then, that was 2018. I have also said that if you are not careful, some of these crises are going to come to North Central and Northwest. And that the terrorist element might find means of coming down. And that's exactly what we are in today now. Exactly. They are playing out. And it's very unfortunate, but that's the situation in which you are. And because of the long injustices that have been meted out to the various components of the society, the complexity, long-term complexities of the governments, especially of the past, and the high level of corruption that become endemic. In fact, it is becoming norm in Nigeria. All these are factors that are enough to bring in people into this environment. So when we talk
causative factors now, we're looking at an amalgam of various factors all coming together to drive this crisis and prolong this warfare.
Absolutely.
But Prof, I am curious about something that you raised earlier, and I said we'll talk about it when we'll talk about the very nature of this war. And I am curious, and I have been for a bit, especially when the whole issue of repentant Boko Haram members, began, and you just referenced that a couple of minutes ago. The thing is, I know a bit, not so much, on the concept of the just war theory that confers war rights between opposing combatants in a conventional war. But do these war rights apply in the conduct of asymmetric warfare? Should we confer war rights on fighters, for non-state groups, when they are engaged in violence that has risen to the level of armed conflict?
Yeah. This has been a very serious issue of recent. It has been a factor of discourse in the Nigeria, it has always been a factor of discourse all over the world. Now, if you look at the global scene, the security global scene, yeah, the theory remains. But the very fact that people join certain criminality because there are indices, there are factors that induce them into it. They do not voluntarily on their own join. For example, let's look at Boko Haram issue. They have methodology and methods of recruiting people into it, force them into it, go into an environment, overrun the environment, constrict the adults and even the youth and give them arms. For example, if this kind of people that were forcibly conscripted can find way of coming out of that, then you can't say because they have done, you are going to kill them.
In that way, that way it applies.
Exactly. Advanced economy, like for example, the United States of America has been involved in such a thing. In his very world all over the place, has been bringing people and has been forgiving them, has been rehabilitating them and so on. So if Nigeria also do that to people that have been properly profiled and their reason of joining the war is known, and they are known that they cannot continue to constitute some havoc to the society, absolutely is wrong. Because don't forget that these people are also citizens. They are victims of some circumstances, unfortunately, albeit dysfunctional and criminal circumstances. So if you have a way of bringing in them, rehabilitating them and putting them into the proper system where they can be useful to the national development, so it be.
Prof,
So,
we're totally out of time, but I will not let you go before you just very briefly give me an answer to this. And I'm talking about the likely implications of French troops leaving the Sahel region. Countries, they're leaving quite soon. I mean, countries like Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, and Chad. This action is likely to have some implication for sub-Saharan countries, including Nigeria. Is that an harbinger of tougher times ahead for countries like Nigeria battling to stem encroachment of insurgents from other axes through the Sahel region, operating on the fringes of Nigerian border communities? Very quickly, Prof.
Yeah, it's a very serious issue, and I think everyone is concerned. But if you look at what has the French, for example, troops have been doing in some of these areas, Burkina Faso, Cameroon, and other, especially neighboring countries that are bordering Nigeria, what have they been doing there? But do not forget that there is a conspiracy theory which says they have been even present there has also spurred the crisis in the Nigeria, especially in the northern zone. But be that as it has been now, it presents more challenges to Nigeria. Let's be frank about it. Because they are present in those areas alone have been able to check the level to which bandit and criminal element coming from the Sahel, coming from North Africa, could penetrate into Nigeria. But it means that Nigeria will also have to look at certain things that they have to do. Upping out their military, upping their intelligence, and ISR should be increasing intelligence, surveillance, and the reconnaissance. And it also means that we have to also quickly start deploying technology, drone, CCTV, and so on. We have to start coming into this environment so that, because Nigeria is very large, the border is very large, and there's no way you can physically monitor Nigeria. So you have to deploy technology. You have to think of so many things.
Unfortunately, this is where we'll end our discussion on this issue. I want to thank you so much, Prof, for coming on Insight. I should also let the viewer know that Professor Adam Okene Ahmed took the 1987 Michael Crowder Prize in Bayero University, Kano, a former head of Department History and War Studies, Dean Postgraduate School as well. Now Director Academics Linkages and Collaboration, Nigerian Defense Academy, Kaduna. Thank you so much indeed for coming on the program, Prof.
Always my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Well, that's it for our conversation on security. I will hand you over now to Elizabeth Omori for the rest of the program.
The crime of human trafficking affects an estimated 25 million people around the world, adults and children in sex trafficking or forced labor. In combating trafficking in persons, governments, civil society organizations, media, faith leaders and community-based organizations are expected to join in the fight. How do we win the war against human trafficking? My guest, Abdulganiu Abubakar, National President, Network Against Child Trafficking, Abuse and Labor, Nigeria, will deal on our focus. Thank you so much for joining us on Insights.
Thank you so much for having me. Good afternoon.
Thank you very
Viewers.
much. Now, human trafficking, what efforts have we made so far in fighting this menace?
The scourge of trafficking in persons, smuggling of migrants, and other related menace is a very major challenge, not just to Nigeria as a country, but the subcontinent, the continent, and the world at large. Since 2003, when the fight against trafficking in persons was institutionalized in Nigeria through the establishment of the National Agency for the Prohibition of Trafficking in Persons, NAPTIP, there has been tremendous improvement in the fight against this menace. The fight takes different approaches, ranging from prevention, protection, participation, partnership, prosecution, and policy. And both civil society organizations and government institutions have been collaborating and working around the clock to ensure that we reduce the incidences of trafficking in persons to the barest minimum. We also have to acknowledge the support of the international community through the different international development partners and initiatives.
All right, we understand that trapping, violence, and financial exploitations are actually factors these people use. How can we put a check on activities of those that smuggle, that traffic these children?
Thank you. Yeah, first of all, let me say that trafficking in persons is a major transnational organized crime. The perpetrators and the syndicates of this crime are highly organized people who have their networks in different parts of the world and are networking and collaborating very efficiently to perpetrate this crime against humanity. So what we can do as responders is to first of all ensure that there is active partnership and collaboration of all stakeholders. And this partnership and collaboration should look at the different approaches that these traffickers utilize. For example, we should be able to step up our awareness creation so that we will enlighten our communities on the dangers of these skills. Also let them know the red flags, the different strategies and tricks employed by these traffickers, as well as their collaborators. And then, of course, also show them what happens in the other part of the world. It is not all greener like they think. There is a lot that happened at the other side. And then, of course, in summary, we should be able to address both the push factors that push our young men and women and children out, and then the pull factors that attracts them at the other end, both at the transit and destination location. So in short, both government and civil society organizations, including the media like you, have a very good and important role to play in ensuring that we address this menace of trafficking in persons using different approaches and strategies, including the ones I have mentioned earlier.
Okay, when we talk about human trafficking and child labor, the family cannot be excluded. So where is the place of the family in preventing trafficking and child labor?
Yeah, the family, of course, play a very major role in the sense that the family is the first level of socialization. If you come across 10 cases, it will interest you to know that 3 to 4 or sometimes 5 of those cases have the active collaboration of family members. So we want to encourage families to be vigilant, first of all, to accept their responsibility as the first level of protection for children. Parents, fathers, mothers should ensure that they provide social safety net for the protection of all children. Through education, providing them with basic education, providing them with care, the basic needs, ensuring that the basic needs of children are met, and then ensuring that the family is together, and then also be able to provide moral discipline, spiritual support, and all forms of support that children and young people need to grow up as responsible adults. Now, if all families do play their role effectively, they will have a community that will together provide the social safety net that is needed for children to grow responsibly and realize their potentials. And then, of course, this will help to shut the doors against these traffickers and people who do not mean well for the society.
From 25 million people are trafficked annually. This is quite huge when we talk about population. But what about families that are neck bent on sending their children out? Because just recently, 6 children, teenagers actually, were rescued in Benin, traveling to Libya, Abuja, and Russia. What do we do?
We come across these survivors and victims every day. And from their experiences, from their narrations, we find that the families are active collaborators. It's not very good for our society. Our values don't support this. So we need to change this narrative. We need to revisit our value orientation to ensure that families take responsibility for their children through providing proper upbringing and discipline of their children. Now, if we all as families are able to do this, then we form a community, of course, that will provide the necessary protection for children. And then if we do all this, we will not even have the traffickers in the first place. Or even if we have them, they will be very minimal. They will be reduced to the barest minimum that will not have given us the level of sleepless nights we have today. I think the family needs to play a greater role in the discipline and the education of children. When I say discipline, I mean active involvement, active engagement of children. Our moral values need to change. We have come across children who say our parents sold personal properties, our parents sold family lands, our parents sold houses to be able to raise money, to pay traffickers, to take us to travel out of this country in the so-called name of seeking for greener pasture. This is not very good for our society.
All right, this is not very good, but what about the government and society?
We are supposed to provide the first level of protection for our children. Government cannot do it alone. So as families, we need to go back to the drawing board. We need to define our values, redefine our values. We need to go back to those days where every child is each one's child, where the community collaborate collectively to provide social safety net and protection for children. And then, of course, the community should also take an active part in ensuring that we expose these traffickers, we expose bad elements that don't mean well in our society. And then on the part of government, we must commend the effort of the government of Nigeria and other governments in both origin, transit, and destination countries who have collaborated actively to fight against trafficking cases. But particularly for the government of Nigeria, we want to commend the government for the establishment of NAPTIP. I am personally involved in the team that brought government and civil society actors from Niger Republic, from the Gambia to Nigeria to study the NAPTIP model, how the government of Nigeria established NAPTIP and how NAPTIP is working there. We came to Sokoto Zonal Command, we were in the NAPTIP headquarters in Abuja, we were in NAPTIP Zonal Command in Benin City, where we looked at the system. And then today, these countries are doing very well. The Anti-Human Trafficking Agency in Niger is doing very well. That of the Gambia is doing very well. And I can tell you that their leadership is stable. So, and I think having such expertise and people with experience at the head of affairs of agencies like NAPTIP will help us to consolidate on the gains we have recorded in our fight against trafficking.
All right, Mr.
Remember,
Abdugani.
last year, Nigeria was at tier 2 watch list. Now we have improved to tier 2. So we should be able to sustain this improvement so that we don't fall back again. And we can only do this if there is active collaboration of all stakeholders, coordinated by a strong agency that has very focused and determined leadership.
Mr. Abdugani Abubakar, thank you so much for your contributions on Insight this week.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much.
And that's it on this episode of the program. Do join us same time next week for more on Insights. My name is Nnamdi Odipo.